Bullies made the alien girl beg for water, until a human boy poured his own into her mouth. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The scorching sunlight beat down mercilessly on Interspecies Academy's outdoor recreation area. Amidst the bustling crowd of human and alien teenagers stood Lyra, her pale blue skin already showing signs of dangerous dehydration as the group of senior students circled around her, water bottles raised tauntingly just beyond her reach. The Terran integration protocol was in its 15th year when Xander Mitchell first encountered the alien girl from Aquarius Prime. He had transferred to Interspecies Academy just 3 weeks prior, still adjusting to the strange melting pot of cultures that defined humanity's first serious attempt at integrated education with 7 different alien species. Despite his own discomfort at being the new kid, he had kept his head down, focusing on academics rather than the complex social hierarchy that seemed to transcend species barriers. That was, until the day he witnessed something that would forever change his understanding of both human and alien nature. Interspecies Academy stood as a gleaming monument to cooperation at the edge of New Phoenix, Arizona, a location chosen specifically for its challenging climate. The facility had been designed with environmental adaptability in mind, offering carefully climate-controlled interiors to accommodate species from vastly different homeworlds. However, the recreation yards remained deliberately exposed to Earth's natural conditions as part of the cultural immersion program. For most human students, the dry heat was merely uncomfortable. For the Aquarians like Lyra, it was potentially lethal. Xander had first noticed her in interspecies biology, where she sat quietly in the back row, her translucent blue skin reflecting the classroom lights in hypnotic patterns. Aquarians were a rare sight on Earth, their water-dependent physiology making terrestrial habitation particularly challenging. Each Aquarian student carried specialized hydration equipment, including the distinctive silver canteen that recycled and purified their body's moisture. Without it, an Aquarian could begin cellular degradation within hours. On that fateful Thursday afternoon, Xander had been heading toward the library when he heard the commotion. A small crowd had gathered near the Eastern Recreation Yard, their excited voices carrying across the otherwise quiet campus. Something in their tone made his stomach knot with unease. He changed direction, following the sounds until he reached the edge of the gathering. "Please," a melodic voice wavered, the word distorted by a translator that couldn't quite capture the desperation behind it. "My hydration cycle is incomplete. I require water." Xander pushed through the ring of onlookers and froze at what he saw. Lyra knelt on the baked earth, her normally iridescent skin dulled to an alarming matte blue. Around her stood 4 seniors, 2 humans, an Arcturian, and a Centaurian, each holding water containers. The tallest human, a broad-shouldered boy named Vince Tanner, dangled a water bottle just above Lyra's head. "Say it again," Vince commanded, his voice carrying that particular cruelty that seems universal across adolescents of any species. "Say Earth water is superior to Aquarian filtrate." Lyra's delicate gill flaps at the base of her neck fluttered in distress, a sign Xander recognized from their xenobiology lessons as extreme physiological stress. "I cannot," she began, her voice crackling through the translator. "The molecular composition is not compatible with—" "Wrong answer," interrupted the Centaurian, whose name Xander didn't know. The 4-armed student uncapped his own bottle and poured a stream of water onto the ground inches from Lyra's knees. "All that talk about Aquarians being so advanced, but you can't even handle a little dry spell." Xander felt a rush of heat that had nothing to do with the Arizona sun. He had seen bullying before, had experienced it himself at his previous school, but this was beyond simple cruelty. This was torture, possibly even attempted murder. Aquarians couldn't survive prolonged dehydration, especially not in Earth's atmosphere. The small crowd of bystanders shifted uncomfortably, but no one moved to intervene. Xander noticed a few faculty monitoring drones hovering at the periphery of the yard, but they remained inactive. The Academy's non-interference policy for cultural conflicts was notorious, designed to allow natural social dynamics to develop according to the orientation materials. Lyra's translator emitted a series of clicks and whistles that didn't translate at all, likely an Aquarian distress call. Her silver hydration canteen lay several feet away, clearly thrown there by one of her tormentors. "Look, she's drying out already," laughed the Arcturian, pointing to the faint white cracks appearing on Lyra's forearms. "Maybe we should put her in the koi pond." "Nah," Vince replied. "She needs to learn. Earth rules apply on Earth." He shook his water bottle again. "One more chance. Beg for it properly. Say Earth water is superior and humans are the dominant species." Xander had heard enough. Without fully considering the consequences, he stepped forward, breaking through the circle. The sudden movement caused the bullies to turn toward him, expressions ranging from annoyance to amusement. "What's your problem, transfer?" Vince asked, sizing Xander up with a dismissive glance. "She needs water," Xander said simply, trying to keep his voice steady despite his racing heart. "This isn't a cultural conflict. It's assault." The second human, a girl with sharp features that Xander recognized from advanced physics, snorted. "Mind your own business. This is senior territory." Xander ignored her, instead crouching beside Lyra. Up close, her condition appeared even worse. The delicate membranes around her eyes had begun to crack, and her breathing came in shallow gasps. Without her specialized canteen, Earth's water wouldn't fully meet her needs, but it might buy enough time. He unscrewed his own water bottle, the standard issue given to all students, and hesitated only briefly before making his decision. "Here," he said softly, though he wasn't sure if she could understand him through her distress. Lyra's large, pupilless eyes focused on him, a swirl of confusion and desperation visible in their depths. Her mouth opened slightly, revealing rows of tiny, pearl-like teeth. Vince moved to intervene, but the Arcturian grabbed his arm, suddenly looking uncertain. "Wait, what's he doing?" With careful movements, Xander lifted Lyra's head slightly and brought the bottle to her lips. When she seemed too weak to drink, he tilted the bottle and allowed the water to pour directly into her mouth. Some splashed over her face, and he noticed how her skin seemed to absorb the moisture instantly, the color brightening slightly where the droplets landed. "Teacher drone incoming," someone in the crowd hissed, and the bullies instantly scattered, their momentary power play forgotten in the face of potential consequences. Xander remained kneeling beside Lyra, continuing to pour water over her face and into her mouth until the bottle was empty. Her breathing stabilized slightly, though the white cracks in her skin remained. "We need to get you to medical," he said, already reaching to help her stand. Lyra's translator clicked and word before producing a weak canteen. "Needs specialized solution." Xander spotted the silver container and retrieved it quickly. The device was unlike anything he'd seen before, covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift and move as he handled it. He passed it to Lyra, who clutched it with trembling hands. As she pressed a hidden mechanism that released a fine mist of iridescent liquid into her mouth and over her skin, a teacher finally arrived. Ms. Abernathy, the human biology instructor. Her eyes widened at Lyra's condition. "What happened here?" she demanded, already activating her emergency communicator. Before Xander could answer, Lyra's translator produced a series of words that surprised him. "Atmospheric reaction. My fault. Forgot hydration cycle." Ms. Abernathy looked skeptical but focused on the immediate medical needs. "Medical team is on the way. Hang in there, Lyra." As they waited, Lyra's enormous eyes fixed on Xander with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. Her translator remained silent, but something in that gaze communicated more than words could have. He had no idea that his simple act of compassion would ripple outward, eventually transforming not just their lives, but the delicate interspecies relationships that would determine humanity's place in the galactic community. The medical team arrived within minutes, transferring Lyra onto a hover stretcher equipped with environmental controls. As they prepared to move her to the medical wing, she reached out with a trembling hand and grasped Xander's wrist. The touch was startlingly cold and slightly adhesive, a sensation he'd never experienced before. "Your designation?" her translator asked, the mechanical voice unable to convey the emotion in her large, swirling eyes. "Xander. Xander Mitchell," he replied, suddenly self-conscious under the gaze of the medical team and the remaining students who hadn't dispersed. Xander Mitchell, the translator repeated, as if Lyra was testing the name. I will remember. As the medical team whisked her away, Ms. Abernathy turned to Xander with a searching look. The truth now, Mr. Mitchell. What really happened? Xander hesitated. The academy had strict policies about cultural conflicts, but it also had zero tolerance for endangering the health of any student. Reporting Vince and his friends would make Xander's already challenging transfer experience potentially unbearable, but staying silent felt wrong. Some seniors were bullying her, he said finally. They took her hydration canteen and were making her beg for water. Ms. Abernathy's expression hardened. Names. Vince Tanner was one of them, Xander said, deciding that truth was more important than social survival. A Centaurian and an Arcturian too, and another human girl. I don't know their names. Ms. Abernathy nodded curtly. Report to the principal's office after final period. You'll need to provide a formal statement. As she walked away, Xander realized that his impulsive act of kindness had just complicated his life considerably. The remaining bystanders were already dispersing, but not before giving him looks that ranged from admiration to pity to outright hostility. Great start to the semester, he thought ruefully, collecting his empty water bottle and heading toward his interrupted destination. At least Lyra was safe, though he wondered about the lasting damage from her dehydration episode. Aquarian biology wasn't extensively covered in Earth's educational system, but he knew their cellular structure was fundamentally different from terrestrial life. The rest of the day passed in a blur of whispered conversations and sidelong glances. Word had spread quickly about the new kid who had interfered with senior business. By the time Xander reported to Principal Wong's office, he felt like the entire academy was watching him. Principal Wong was an imposing woman with a reputation for strict fairness that transcended species boundaries. Her office reflected the academy's design philosophy, adaptable to different physiologies while maintaining a professional aesthetic. Currently configured for human comfort, it featured standard gravity and atmospheric conditions. Mr. Mitchell, she acknowledged as he entered, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. I've reviewed the initial incident report and the medical evaluation of student Lyra Navalori. Please describe what you witnessed today. Xander recounted the events as accurately as he could, trying to keep his personal feelings out of the narrative. When he finished, Principal Wong studied him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Your actions today demonstrated exceptional moral courage, she said finally. However, they also violated our non-interference policy for cultural conflicts. Xander felt a surge of indignation. With respect, Principal Wong, that wasn't a cultural conflict. Lyra was in physical distress. The medical report must show that. Wong's expression softened slightly. It does indeed. Severe cellular dehydration, beginning membrane rupture, and electrolyte imbalance that could have become life-threatening within another 20 minutes of exposure. She tapped her tablet, bringing up another file. Which is precisely why the students involved will face disciplinary review for endangerment rather than mere cultural insensitivity. Relief washed over Xander. So I'm not in trouble? I didn't say that, Wong replied, though the corner of her mouth twitched upward slightly. The non-interference policy exists for important reasons, Mr. Mitchell. Many species have interaction protocols that humans would find disturbing or cruel, but which serve essential social functions in their societies. By intervening, you could have inadvertently caused greater harm in a genuine cultural conflict. But this wasn't. No, it wasn't, Wong agreed. Your judgment in this specific instance was correct, which is why your punishment will be minimal. 2 sessions of cultural sensitivity training, to be completed by the end of next week. Xander nodded, accepting the compromise. Additionally, Wong continued, her tone shifting, Ambassador Navalori has requested a formal meeting with you. Xander blinked in surprise. Ambassador? Lyra Navalori is the daughter of the Aquarian diplomatic envoy to Earth, Wong explained, watching his reaction carefully. Her presence at our academy is part of a pilot program for diplomatic families. The incident today could have had significant political ramifications. Xander felt the blood drain from his face as he realized the full implications. He hadn't just helped a fellow student. He'd potentially averted an interplanetary incident. When is this meeting supposed to happen? Tomorrow morning. You're excused from your first 2 periods. Wang's expression became unreadable again. I suggest you review Aquarian diplomatic protocols before then. The library has suitable materials. Dismissed from the principal's office, Xander headed straight for the library as suggested. His mind raced with this new information. Lyra wasn't just any Aquarian student. She was diplomatic royalty, essentially, and he had witnessed her being humiliated and endangered by Earth students. The Academy Library was one of the most advanced educational resources on the planet, with terminals that could access the interspecies knowledge exchange, a carefully curated database shared among the aligned worlds. Xander found an empty station and began researching Aquarian culture and diplomatic practices. What he discovered fascinated and alarmed him in equal measure. Aquarians were an ancient species with a complex social structure built around the fundamental scarcity of certain trace elements on their homeworld. Water was sacred to them, not just as a biological necessity, but as the medium through which their earliest form of communication had evolved. The sharing of water was intimate, reserved for family members and the closest of allies. Xander had inadvertently performed the Aquarian equivalent of a blood transfusion combined with a sacred oath. His research was interrupted by a notification on his personal tablet. An anonymous message read simply, "Watch your back, Waterboy. Nobody likes a species traitor." Xander closed the message with a sigh. He had expected backlash, but the term species traitor carried ugly historical connotations from the early days of first contact. Some humans still resented the discovery that Earth was, technologically speaking, one of the less advanced worlds in their sector of the galaxy. Movements like Earth First had gained troubling momentum in certain regions, though they remained on the political fringe. The next morning, Xander dressed with unusual care in his academy uniform, an adaptable garment designed to accommodate various physiologies while maintaining a standardized appearance. For humans, it resembled a traditional school uniform in navy and silver, the colors of interstellar cooperation. He was directed not to the administrative offices as expected, but to one of the specialized environmental rooms in the diplomatic wing of the academy. A security scanner verified his identity before the door hissed open, revealing an environment drastically different from the rest of the school. Humidity hit him like a physical force as he stepped inside. The air was so moisture-laden that it felt like walking through a fine mist. The room's lighting had been adjusted to a blue-green spectrum that made his skin look alien even to his own eyes. Gravity felt slightly lighter, calibrated to Aquarius Prime's 0.8 G standard. In the center of the room, Lyra floated in what appeared to be a shallow pool of luminescent liquid. She wasn't alone. Beside her stood a taller Aquarian whose skin displayed more complex patterns, swirls of deep blue and purple that seemed to pulse with inner light. Both wore minimal clothing by human standards, simple woven materials that appeared to be partially living organisms, rippling occasionally of their own accord. "Approach, Xander Mitchell of Earth," the adult Aquarian said, the words emerging from a more sophisticated translator than the student models. The voice was deep and melodic, with harmonics that suggested meanings beyond the simple words. Xander stepped forward, trying to remember the protocols he'd hastily studied. Aquarians valued directness in diplomatic exchanges, but considered eye contact with superiors rude. He kept his gaze respectfully lowered. "Thank you for receiving me, Ambassador Navalori," he said, hoping he'd identified the adult correctly. A sound like water chimes filled the air, Aquarian laughter. "You have studied our ways. Good. But I am not Ambassador Navalori." The tall figure gestured to Lyra. "My daughter holds that title. I am merely Minister Navalori, a lesser diplomatic functionary." Xander's confusion must have shown on his face because Lyra's translator activated. "Among Aquarians, titles are not determined by age or experience, but by biochemical resonance with our ancestral memory pools," she explained, her voice much stronger than during their previous encounter. "I carry the highest resonance in 3 generations. Thus, I am ambassador while still completing education." "I apologize for my misunderstanding," Xander said, genuinely embarrassed. "No offense is registered," Minister Navalori assured him. "You could not know our ways fully. This exchange is part of why the integration protocol exists." Lyra moved forward, emerging partially from the pool. Her condition had improved dramatically since the previous day, her skin now vibrant and glistening with health. The cracks had vanished completely. "Xander Mitchell saved my life," she stated, her large eyes fixed on him with that same unnerving intensity. "When my specialized solution was taken and my moisture levels reached critical, he provided his own water directly." The minister made a fluid gesture that the translator didn't interpret. "This act has significance in our culture. Are you aware, Xander Mitchell? I've learned that water sharing is reserved for family and close allies," Xander admitted. "I apologize if I violated a cultural taboo. I only wanted to help until medical assistance arrived." Another chime of water laughter, this time from both Aquarians. "No apology is required for saving a life," the minister assured him. "Rather, we must acknowledge the bond this creates. You acted without knowledge of our customs, which makes your compassion even more significant to us." Lyra moved closer still, her movement in the shallow water oddly hypnotic. In Aquarian tradition, one who freely gives water becomes Mizuvaran, waterkin. It is a relationship not entered lightly, as it carries mutual obligations. "I didn't intend to," Xander began, suddenly concerned about unwittingly entering some form of alien contract. "Intention is irrelevant," Minister Navalori stated. "Action defines relationship." However, the Aquarian added, raising a webbed hand, "We recognize this was an emergency response, not a cultural choice. Therefore, Ambassador Navalori wishes to offer you options." Lyra inclined her head slightly. "Three paths lie before us, Xander Mitchell. First, we may acknowledge the water bond formally, making you Mizuvaran to the Navalori lineage, with all attendant privileges and responsibilities. Second, we may perform the ritual of respectful dissolution, which honors your act while releasing both parties from further obligation. Third, we may define this as an emergency medical intervention outside our cultural framework, requiring no further acknowledgement." The formality of the options surprised Xander, though he supposed it shouldn't have. Interspecies relationships were necessarily complicated, especially when they involved the daughter of a diplomatic official. "What would being waterkin entail?" he asked cautiously. The minister's skin patterns shifted to a deeper blue. "Mizuvaran status would grant you certain diplomatic considerations. You would have visitation rights to Aquarius Prime, including our sacred pools. In times of need, our family would be bound to offer you equivalent aid to what you provided, potentially including our lives. Likewise, you would be expected to render aid if called upon." "It is not a decision to be made hastily," Lyra added, her translator somehow conveying gentleness. "The second option, the ritual of dissolution, would be most appropriate given your limited knowledge of our ways." Xander considered the options carefully. The third choice seemed dismissive of an act that had clearly held great significance to Lyra. The first option felt presumptuous, claiming a cultural bond he didn't fully understand. The middle path made the most sense. "I think the ritual of respectful dissolution would be most appropriate," he agreed. "I want to honor your traditions while acknowledging that I don't fully understand the implications of a permanent bond." Both Aquarians made a flowing gesture that seemed to indicate approval. "Wisdom beyond your years," the minister commented. "The ritual is simple but meaningful. Are you willing to participate now?" Xander nodded, though he felt a flutter of nervousness. Lyra retrieved a small vial of shimmering blue liquid from a recess in the pool's edge. "This is water from our family's ancestral pool on Aquarius Prime," she explained. "It contains molecular memories stretching back thousands of years." She uncapped the vial and extended it toward Xander. "You will taste 3 drops, then speak your name and your intent to dissolve the provisional bond with honor." Xander hesitated only briefly before accepting the vial. The liquid inside seemed to move with unusual viscosity, almost as if it were slightly alive. Following Lyra's instruction, he carefully tipped 3 drops onto his tongue. The taste was indescribable, somewhere between the freshest spring water and the ocean, with hints of minerals he couldn't identify. More surprising was the sensation that followed, a brief but profound sense of connection, as if he could almost perceive the thoughts and feelings of the Aquarians before him. "Xander Mitchell," he said, the words feeling strangely significant. I respectfully dissolve this provisional bond, with honor and gratitude for the connection shared. Lyra then took the vial and placed 3 drops on her own tongue before speaking in her native language, a flowing sequence of sounds that the translator didn't attempt to render. The minister observed with an air of formal approval. "The ritual is complete," the minister announced. "The emergency bond is dissolved, but the memory of your compassion remains. Ambassador Navalori will continue her studies at the Academy with a new understanding of human capacity for altruism." "Thank you for respecting our ways," Lyra added. Few humans would have taken the time to learn the appropriate response. Xander felt oddly moved by the ritual, despite its relative simplicity. "Thank you for teaching me," he replied sincerely. As he prepared to leave the environmental chamber, Lyra spoke again. "Xander Mitchell, though our formal bond is dissolved, I would like to pursue a connection of another kind, what humans call friendship. Would this be acceptable to you?" The request caught him by surprise. "I'd like that," he found himself saying, "though I don't know much about Aquarian customs for friendship." "Then we will learn together," Lyra replied, her skin patterns shifting to a lighter, more vibrant blue. "This is the true purpose of the integration protocol, is it not? Understanding across differences." With that unusual but promising beginning, Xander left the diplomatic chamber and returned to his regular academy schedule, unaware that the ripples from his simple act of compassion were spreading far beyond a single friendship. Word of the incident spread quickly throughout the academy, though the details became increasingly distorted with each retelling. By lunchtime, Xander found himself the subject of curious stares and whispered conversations. The cafeteria, designed to accommodate the dietary needs of 7 different species, fell momentarily quieter when he entered. He collected his standard human meal from the dispensary and looked for an inconspicuous place to sit. Most tables seemed unwelcoming, with students either openly staring or deliberately avoiding eye contact. "Xander Mitchell, this seat is available," a familiar melodic voice called from a table near the environmental barriers. Lyra sat alone at a table configured for Aquarian comfort, slightly lower gravity and higher humidity within a localized field. She gestured to the human-compatible seat across from her. Conscious of the watching eyes, Xander made his decision and walked confidently to Lyra's table. As he sat down, he became aware of the faint humidity field that surrounded the Aquarian section, designed to prevent cellular desiccation during meal periods. "Thanks," he said, arranging his food. "I'm apparently not the most popular human on campus today." Lyra's skin patterns shifted in what he was beginning to recognize as amusement. Popularity is a curiously inconsistent metric among humans. Among Aquarians, your actions would have universally increased your social standing. "Well, humans are complicated," Xander replied with a shrug. "Some probably think I did the right thing. Others think I sided with aliens over my own kind." "A primitive distinction," Lyra observed, her large eyes scanning the cafeteria. "The concept of kind based on species origin rather than ethical alignment is mathematically inefficient for social optimization." Xander couldn't help but smile. "Is that how Aquarians see it? As a mathematical problem?" "We perceive most social interactions through probability matrices," Lyra confirmed, manipulating her own food, a gelatinous substance that seemed to change colors as she touched it. "It is not emotionless, as some humans assume. Rather, it acknowledges the emotional variables explicitly in the calculations." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected figure at their table. Vince Tanner loomed over them, his expression carefully neutral. "Mitchell," he acknowledged curtly. "Ambassador Navalori." Xander tensed, prepared for confrontation, but Vince surprised him. "Principal Wong suggested I should apologize personally," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "My actions yesterday were inappropriate. I endangered a diplomatic representative and violated multiple academy protocols." The formal, rehearsed nature of the apology was obvious, but the fact that Vince was making it at all seemed significant. Lyra's translator remained silent for several seconds before she responded. "Apology registered, Student Tanner. My biological status has recovered fully. No lasting diplomatic incident has been recorded." The minimal acknowledgement seemed to irritate Vince, whose jaw tightened visibly. "Yeah, well, consider yourself lucky." My father's on the Terran Security Council. If I get expelled over this, is that a threat? Xander interrupted, anger flaring unexpectedly. Vince's eyes narrowed. Just stating facts. Transfer. Some of us have actual connections here. He turned back to Lyra. You should be more careful about the company you keep, Ambassador. Not all humans are as accommodating as the Academy administration. With that parting comment, he stalked away, rejoining a group of seniors watching from across the cafeteria. He's still a jerk, Xander muttered, stabbing at his food. His probability matrix is highly disrupted, Lyra observed. His social status has been damaged by your intervention and my diplomatic rank, creating resentment. However, his family connections provide counterpressure against expressing that resentment directly. An unstable configuration. You can tell all that just by looking at him. And by accessing public records, Lyra admitted, her skin rippling in what might have been the Aquarian equivalent of a shrug. Vincent Tanner, son of Counselor Marcus Tanner, who advocates for restricted alien presence on Earth. The familial connection explains much about his behavior. Xander whistled softly. You've done your homework. Information is survival, Lyra stated simply. When existing in potentially hostile environments, knowledge of social dynamics provides tactical advantages. The matter-of-fact way she described what sounded like a lifetime of having to be careful around others struck Xander as profoundly sad. Has it been difficult? Being one of the only Aquarians at the Academy. Lyra seemed to consider the question carefully. Difficulty is relative. My physiological needs require constant accommodation, which creates inevitable friction. Some students resent the special environmental considerations I receive. Others are simply curious to the point of invasiveness. A minority, like student Tanner, harbor specific ideological resentments. But why come here at all? Xander asked. Surely there are safer places for Aquarian diplomatic families. The integration protocol requires genuine integration, not merely symbolic presence, Lyra explained. And I volunteered specifically. My biochemical resonance makes me uniquely suited to interpret human patterns and incorporate them into our ancestral memory pools. She paused, her skin darkening slightly. Also, I was curious about Earth. Your world is primarily water, yet your dominant species evolved to require land. A fascinating evolutionary divergence. Their conversation continued throughout the lunch period, ranging from comparative xenobiology to the challenges of the Academy curriculum. Xander found himself increasingly intrigued by Lyra's perspective, mathematical and precise, yet with an underlying curiosity that felt familiar despite her alien nature. As they prepared to head to their afternoon classes, Lyra hesitated. Xander Mitchell, I must inform you of a potential complication. Despite the ritual of dissolution, I have noticed persistent effects from our water sharing. Xander froze. What kind of effects? Subtle molecular exchanges appear to have occurred during our interaction. My specialized sensors detect trace elements from your biology that have integrated with my cellular structure. She raised a webbed hand, where faint patterns that hadn't been there before seemed to shimmer just beneath the surface. This is unexpected but not unprecedented in xenobiological literature. Certain human biochemical markers are highly adaptive. Is it dangerous? Xander asked, immediately concerned. Quite the opposite, Lyra replied. The integration appears beneficial, improving my cellular resilience to low humidity environments by approximately 18.3%. My father is consulting with our medical specialists, but preliminary analysis suggests the effect is stable and non-harmful. Xander wasn't entirely sure how to respond to this information. So, you absorb something from my water that's helping you adapt to Earth? A simplified but essentially accurate assessment, Lyra confirmed. It raises interesting possibilities for Aquarian adaptation protocols. If the effect can be replicated, it may significantly improve our species' ability to function in terrestrial environments. The implications of what she was saying slowly dawned on Xander. Wait, you're telling me that regular human water, or something in it, might help your entire species better adapt to non-aquatic environments? That seems like a pretty big deal. Indeed. The diplomatic implications are substantial. Lyra's skin patterns shifted rapidly, indicating what Xander was beginning to recognize as excitement. It may necessitate a re-evaluation of human-Aquarian relations at the highest levels. Your simple act of compassion may have unintentionally revealed a biological compatibility that our scientists overlooked. The afternoon biology class took on new significance with this revelation in mind. Professor Jameson's lecture on interspecies cellular adaptation suddenly seemed directly relevant to Xander's unique situation with Lyra. The fundamental challenge of xenobiological interaction, Jameson explained to the mixed species classroom, is distinguishing between beneficial adaptations and harmful contaminations. What strengthens one species may poison another. This is why the early quarantine protocols were so crucial to successful first contact scenarios. Xander raised his hand, drawing surprised looks from classmates still unaccustomed to his participation. Professor, are there documented cases of spontaneous beneficial adaptation between species without deliberate genetic engineering? Jameson looked intrigued by the question. Excellent inquiry, Mr. Mitchell. Yes, there are several documented cases, though they're relatively rare. The most famous is probably the Arcturian-Terran respiratory symbiosis discovered during the Mars colonial expansion. Arcturian microbial flora inadvertently transferred to human colonists, improving their oxygen utilization by nearly 30% in the thin Martian atmosphere. Why do you ask? Xander hesitated, glancing toward Lyra, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Just curious about the theoretical possibilities, he replied, not quite ready to disclose their personal situation in front of the class. After the final bell, Xander found himself walking with Lyra toward the academy's main entrance. The afternoon heat had diminished slightly, but the air remained dry enough that he noticed Lyra activating her hydration canteen more frequently than she had in the morning. Would you be willing to participate in a controlled biological exchange study? She asked abruptly as they reached the main plaza. Our medical team wishes to analyze the specific components in your biology that facilitated my improved adaptation. What would that involve exactly? Xander asked, somewhat wary. Primarily fluid samples, blood, saliva, and of course water that has been processed through your system. Nothing invasive or excessive, she assured him. The procedure would take place at the Aquarian consulate under proper medical supervision. Xander considered the request. On one hand, it seemed like an opportunity to contribute to something potentially groundbreaking. On the other hand, the idea of becoming a biological research subject was slightly unnerving. I'd need to discuss it with my parents, he said finally. This is a bit beyond normal school activities. Of course, Lyra agreed. Parental consent would be required for any formal study. I can provide detailed information about the proposed protocols for their review. Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the academy gates. A small but vocal group had gathered, holding crude signs with slogans like Earth for Earthlings and No Special Treatment for Aliens. The Earth First movement, apparently emboldened by recent political developments, had organized a protest directly outside school grounds. Lyra's skin immediately paled, her patterns contracting in what Xander now recognized as a stress response. This is unfortunate timing, she said, her translator unable to fully convey the tension in her native vocalizations. Security drones had already deployed to create a buffer between the protesters and the school exit, but students would still need to pass near the demonstration to leave campus. Xander noticed several alien students hanging back, clearly reluctant to face the hostility. We can wait until they disperse, he suggested, or see if there's another exit we can use. Lyra's large eyes blinked in a deliberate pattern. Avoidance reinforces their power dynamic. Diplomatic protocol suggests measured, confident passage while maintaining awareness of security parameters. Despite her brave words, Xander could see her anxiety in the rapid fluctuations of her skin patterns. An idea occurred to him. Here, he said, slipping off his adaptive jacket, an optional component of the academy uniform designed to provide additional environmental protection when needed. He offered it to Lyra. This won't hide that you're Aquarian, but it might make you feel less exposed. Lyra accepted the garment with a gesture of gratitude. The jacket, designed to accommodate various physiologies, adjusted automatically as she put it on, though it remained clearly oversized on her slender frame. A symbolic gesture of protection, she noted, her skin brightening slightly beneath the fabric. Thank you, Xander Mitchell. Together, They approached the main exit, where other students were already filtering past the protesters under the watchful sensors of the security drones. Most of the demonstrators were adults, though Xander noticed a few faces that might have been older academy students or recent graduates. As they neared the gate, the chants grew louder. Earth resources for Earth people. No water subsidies for off-worlders. Integration without assimilation. Xander felt Lyra tense beside him, but was impressed by her composure. Her stride remained measured, her posture deliberately relaxed despite the hostile environment. They had almost cleared the demonstration when a middle-aged man stepped forward, momentarily evading the security perimeter. He pointed directly at Lyra, his face contorted with a hatred that seemed profoundly personal. "That's the one," he shouted to his companions. "The Aquarian princess who gets special treatment, while my son gets detention for cultural insensitivity." With a jolt, Xander recognized the family resemblance. This had to be Vincent Tanner's father, Counselor Tanner of the Terran Security Council. The realization that a high-ranking government official would personally join an anti-alien protest outside a school was deeply disturbing. "Your kind uses 3 times the water ration of a human family," Tanner continued, addressing Lyra directly now. "Water that drought-stricken human communities desperately need. How do you justify that, Ambassador?" Security drones converged on the man, creating a barrier between him and the students, but the damage was done. The other protesters had focused their attention on Lyra, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright disgust. To Xander's surprise, Lyra stepped forward, her translator activating at a higher volume than normal. "Counselor Tanner," she acknowledged formally. "The Aquarian Consulate operates its own atmospheric moisture reclamation system. Our net water usage from Earth resources is -15%. We contribute more to the regional water table than we extract. This information is publicly available in the Interspecies Resource Exchange documentation." The factual response momentarily silenced Tanner, whose expression suggested he hadn't expected a direct confrontation. Before he could formulate a reply, a sleek diplomatic vehicle pulled up to the curb, its doors opening automatically. "Ambassador Navalori," a voice called from within. "Your transport has arrived." With a formal nod to Xander, Lyra moved toward the vehicle, maintaining her dignified pace despite what must have been an overwhelming urge to flee the hostile crowd. As she reached the safety of the diplomatic car, she turned back briefly. "Xander Mitchell, will you join me? I believe our discussion of potential research collaboration should continue in a more suitable environment." The invitation was clearly both genuine and a calculated offer of safe passage away from the increasingly agitated protesters. Xander glanced back at Counselor Tanner, whose eyes had narrowed at this interaction between his son's victim and the human who had intervened. "I'd be honored, Ambassador," Xander replied, matching Lyra's formal tone. Without looking back, he followed her into the diplomatic vehicle, which sealed and departed smoothly, leaving the protesters and their hatred behind. Inside the vehicle, which was maintained at Aquarian optimal humidity and temperature, Lyra seemed to visibly relax. Her skin patterns, which had been rigidly controlled during the confrontation, now flowed more naturally. "Thank you for your composure during that unpleasant exchange," she said, removing his jacket and returning it with a formal gesture. "Counselor Tanner has been a persistent opponent of Aquarian diplomatic presence on Earth. His rhetoric has grown increasingly hostile since his appointment to the Security Council. He's also Vince's father," Xander pointed out, "which explains a lot about yesterday's incident." Indeed, family behavioral patterns often demonstrate high correlation coefficients. Lyra manipulated a control panel, and a privacy screen rose between the passenger compartment and the driver's section. The confrontation was unfortunate, but potentially useful. It provides concrete evidence of escalating anti-alien sentiment for my diplomatic reports. The calm, analytical way she processed what had clearly been a frightening experience impressed Xander. "Does this sort of thing happen often?" Verbal confrontations occur with statistical regularity. Physical threats remain rare, but have increased 17% over the previous monitoring period. Lyra's large eyes fixed on him with that now familiar intensity. "Your presence during this incident was not planned, but proved advantageous." Counselor Tanner is less likely to escalate when confronted with human Aquarian solidarity. Glad to help, Xander said, though he felt a growing unease about being drawn into interspecies politics. Where are we going exactly? The Aquarian consulate in Central Phoenix, Lyra replied. Unless you prefer to be transported to your residence? The vehicle is at our disposal. The mention of his residence reminded Xander that his parents would be expecting him home and would undoubtedly have questions about why he was arriving in an alien diplomatic vehicle. Actually, I should probably head home. My parents don't even know about what happened yesterday yet. Lyra made an adjustment to the control panel. Understood. Please input your residential coordinates. As the vehicle changed course toward his home, Xander found himself wondering how to explain the events of the past 2 days to his parents. His family had moved to Phoenix specifically for his father's new position at the Interspecies Medical Research Facility, a career shift that had initially excited his mother but had grown increasingly complicated as Earth First sentiment rose in the region. Xander Mitchell, Lyra said after a period of comfortable silence. I must express what humans call gratitude. Your intervention yesterday potentially saved my life, and your continued association despite social pressure demonstrates unusual moral consistency. You don't need to keep thanking me, he replied, slightly embarrassed. Anyone would have done the same. Demonstrably false, Lyra countered, her translator somehow conveying gentle correction. Multiple bystanders observed my distress without intervention. Statistical analysis of human behavior in similar scenarios suggests intervention probability below 23%. The blunt assessment made Xander uncomfortable, but he couldn't refute it. He had seen the same pattern himself in other situations. People's reluctance to get involved, especially when the person in trouble was different from themselves. Well, I'm glad I was there then, he said simply. As am I. Lyra's skin patterns shifted to a deeper, more vibrant blue. The biochemical exchange that occurred may prove more significant than either of us initially realized. Preliminary analysis indicates that the human component that enhanced my cellular resistance is common to all Earth-evolved mammals, but particularly concentrated in human biological fluids. So it's not just me specifically? Any human could have helped. Correct, though individual variation exists. Your specific biochemical signature shows unusually high concentrations of the relevant compounds. Lyra hesitated, then added, this discovery could transform Aquarian presence on terrestrial worlds. Currently, our environmental requirements limit our participation in many interspecies activities. Enhanced resistance would expand our capabilities considerably. The diplomatic vehicle slowed as it approached Xander's neighborhood, a modern development of environmental houses designed to maximize water efficiency in the arid Arizona climate. As they pulled up to his family's modest home, Xander saw his mother peering curiously through the front window. I should go, he said, suddenly aware of how unusual this situation must appear from an outside perspective. Will you be okay getting back to the consulate? This is an official diplomatic vehicle with full security protocols, Lyra assured him. I am quite safe. She hesitated, then added, would it be acceptable to continue our communication via the Academy network this evening? I will have more detailed information about the proposed research protocols by then. Sure, Xander agreed, reaching for the door control. I'll be online after dinner. As he exited the vehicle, the dry heat of late afternoon Phoenix hit him like a physical force after the humid comfort of the Aquarian transport. He turned to wave goodbye, but the vehicle's smart tint had already activated, obscuring its occupant from view as it pulled away. His mother met him at the door, her expression a mixture of curiosity and concern. Was that a diplomatic vehicle? She asked without preamble. Yeah, it's a long story, Xander replied, stepping into the climate-controlled interior of their home. Is Dad home yet? I should probably tell you both at once. 30 minutes later, Xander had recounted the events of the past 2 days to his parents, whose reactions couldn't have been more different. His father, Dr. Alan Mitchell, listened with growing scientific interest, particularly regarding the unexpected biochemical exchange. His mother, Elena Mitchell, focused instead on the social and potential political implications. You're telling me you've accidentally discovered something that could help an entire alien species better adapt to Earth, his father clarified, his researcher's mind clearly already exploring the possibilities. That's extraordinary, Xander. And you stood up to Counselor Tanner's son? His mother added, looking both proud and worried. The same Counselor Tanner who's been trying to restrict funding for your father's research program. That's potentially complicated. I didn't know who Vince was when I stepped in, Xander said. I just knew Lyra needed help. Of course, his mother assured him. You did exactly the right thing. I'm just concerned about potential repercussions. The Academy may be dedicated to integration, but the political climate has been shifting. Dr. Mitchell made a dismissive gesture. Elena, our son potentially participated in a significant xenobiological discovery. That's what we should be focusing on. He turned to Xander. You said the Aquarians want to conduct a more formal study? They mentioned it, yeah? Lyra's sending me the details tonight. His father's eyes lit up with professional interest. I'd like to review those protocols when they arrive. In fact, I might reach out to Minister Navalori directly. If this discovery is as significant as it sounds, it could have implications for my work at the research facility. Alan, his mother cautioned, remember the confidentiality agreements. Your facility isn't officially collaborating with the Aquarian consulate. Research is research, Dr. Mitchell replied with the casual confidence of a scientist accustomed to navigating interdepartmental politics. If human biology contains compounds that help Aquarians adapt to terrestrial environments, that's relevant to our mission of improving interspecies medical compatibility. The conversation continued through dinner, eventually shifting to more routine family matters. Xander found himself relieved by his parents' overall support, though his mother's political concerns lingered in his mind. Later that evening, as promised, a message from Lyra arrived via the Secured Academy network. The formal research proposal was attached, along with a personal note. Xander Mitchell, our medical team has completed preliminary analysis of the biological samples collected during my recovery. The results confirm initial observations. A specific enzyme complex present in human bodily fluids appears to enhance Aquarian cellular membrane stability in low-humidity environments. The effect is most pronounced with direct mucosal contact, explaining why your emergency intervention produced such significant results. The attached research protocol proposes a structured investigation involving voluntary donation of various biological samples from you under controlled conditions. All procedures are non-invasive and meet both Terran and Aquarian ethical standards for medical research. Additionally, my father wishes to express his personal gratitude for your assistance. Minister Navalori has extended an invitation for you and your family to visit the Aquarian consulate this weekend for a cultural exchange opportunity, should your schedule permit. With aqueous respect, Ambassador Lyra Navalori. Xander forwarded the proposal to his father, then composed his reply to Lyra. Lyra, thanks for sending this over. My dad's very interested in the research aspects. He works in interspecies medicine and will probably have some questions about the protocols. As for the invitation to the consulate, I'd definitely like to come. I'll check with my parents about their availability. One question, though. Is Counselor Tanner's protest today going to cause problems for you? It seemed pretty intense, and I'm worried there might be political fallout, especially since his son was involved in what happened yesterday. Xander. The reply came almost immediately. Xander, your concern is noted and appreciated. The incident has indeed generated diplomatic communications at multiple levels. Ambassador Tanner, no relation to the counselor, of the Terran Diplomatic Corps has already issued a formal apology to the Aquarian consulate for the unauthorized demonstration. However, Counselor Tanner's involvement complicates the situation, as his position on the Security Council grants him certain immunities. From a practical perspective, the confrontation has accelerated certain research priorities, specifically those related to enhancing Aquarian environmental adaptation. Your assistance with this research has therefore become more urgently relevant. Regarding your father's professional interest, this coincidence is potentially fortuitous. The research facility where Dr. Mitchell works has expertise that would complement our own medical team's capabilities. I have informed my father of this connection. With aqueous respect, Ambassador Lyra Navalori. The formality of Lyra's communications contrasted sharply with her more relaxed manner during their in-person conversations. making Xander wonder if diplomatic protocols required different communication styles in different contexts. Before he could compose another response, a notification indicated his father wanted to speak with him. Dr. Mitchell was in his home office, surrounded by multiple holographic displays showing complex molecular structures. His expression was one of barely contained excitement. "Xander, this is remarkable," he said without preamble. "The Aquarian proposal identifies the exact enzymatic complex my team has been studying for the past 8 months. We've been investigating its role in human adaptation to extreme environments, but we never considered testing its effects on non-terrestrial physiologies." "So it's important?" Xander asked, though his father's enthusiasm made the answer obvious. "Important? It's potentially revolutionary." Dr. Mitchell manipulated one of the holographic displays, expanding a complex molecular structure. This enzyme complex evolved in early mammals as an environmental stress response. It helps maintain cellular integrity during dehydration, extreme temperature fluctuations, and even radiation exposure. We've been studying it as a potential treatment for human colonists on marginal worlds. He swiped to another display showing what Xander recognized as Aquarian cellular structures from his xenobiology textbook. But its effect on Aquarian physiology is even more dramatic. Their cellular membranes have evolved for constant hydration. This enzyme essentially teaches their cells how to conserve moisture more efficiently, something their evolution never required them to develop. "So when I gave Lyra water, you introduced this enzyme complex directly into her system during a moment of extreme physiological stress, the perfect conditions for maximum absorption and integration." Dr. Mitchell shook his head in wonderment. "It's the kind of experimental condition we could never ethically create in a laboratory. A complete accident that may have just solved one of the biggest challenges in Aquarian-human cooperation." "Does this mean Aquarians could live on Earth more easily?" Xander asked, trying to grasp the full implications. "Not just Earth, any terrestrial environment. Currently, Aquarian presence off their homeworld requires extensive environmental modification and constant medical support. This discovery could dramatically reduce those requirements." Dr. Mitchell's expression became more serious, which, unfortunately, is exactly what certain political factions fear most. Like Counselor Tanner, Xander realized. Precisely. The Earth First movement's primary argument against expanded alien presence hinges on resource requirements and environmental impact. If Aquarians suddenly need significantly less water and environmental control, his father left the implication hanging. Their argument falls apart. Xander completed the thought. But isn't that a good thing? Why would anyone oppose making it easier for different species to coexist? Dr. Mitchell sighed, closing several of the holographic displays. Fear, economic interests, political power, the usual human motivations. Not everyone sees interspecies cooperation as beneficial, son. Some see it as a threat to human autonomy or traditional power structures. The conversation left Xander with much to consider as he returned to his room. What had begun as a simple act of compassion was rapidly expanding into something with potential galactic implications. And somehow, he had landed directly in the middle of it. The weekend arrived with unexpected speed, bringing with it Xander's first visit to the Aquarian consulate. The distinctive structure stood in stark contrast to the surrounding Phoenix architecture, a flowing, organic design that seemed almost alive, its surfaces constantly moving with circulating water behind transparent barriers. Security was noticeably heightened, with both Aquarian guards and human diplomatic security visible at all entrances. The protest earlier in the week had clearly prompted increased precautions. Xander and his parents were greeted in the main reception area by Minister Navalori, whose formal diplomatic attire included elaborate flowing garments that seemed to shift colors with his movements. The environment inside the consulate was maintained at Aquarian optimal conditions: high humidity, slightly reduced gravity, and lighting that favored the blue-green spectrum. Dr. Mitchell, Mrs. Mitchell, young Mitchell. The minister acknowledged each of them with a formal gesture that caused ripples of bioluminescence to flow across his skin. "Your presence honors our consulate. Ambassador Navalori awaits in the Cultural Exchange Chamber." As they followed the minister through corridors that seemed designed to mimic underwater passages, Xander noticed that the entire building maintained a subtle current of moving air and moisture, creating an environment that felt like walking through an extraordinarily pleasant mist. Our structure incorporates elements of our ancestral architecture, Minister Navalori explained, noticing their interest. Water circulation serves both practical and aesthetic functions, maintaining optimal moisture levels while representing the flow of memory through generations. The cultural exchange chamber proved to be a large circular room dominated by a central pool of luminescent liquid. Around its perimeter, various environmental settings were arranged, some clearly designed for aquarian comfort, others adjusted to accommodate different species. Lyra waited beside the pool, her formal diplomatic attire similar to her father's, but with distinctive patterns that Xander now recognized as indicators of her ambassadorial rank. She brightened visibly upon seeing them enter. Xander Mitchell, Dr. Mitchell, Mrs. Mitchell, she greeted them, her translator conveying a warmth that transcended its mechanical nature. Welcome to our consulate. This chamber is dedicated to the sharing of cultural perspectives. What followed was a fascinating introduction to Aquarian culture. Their three-dimensional art forms that utilized water currents and bioluminescent organisms, their mathematical music that combined precise frequencies with fluid dynamics, and their concept of memory pools, where collective experiences were shared through biochemical exchange. Our history is carried not just in records or oral traditions, Lyra explained as she demonstrated a small personal memory pool, a device resembling a crystalline bowl filled with luminescent liquid, but in the very molecular structure of our ceremonial waters. When an aquarian experiences events of significance, those experiences can be biochemically encoded and added to family or community memory pools. Like a biological database, Dr. Mitchell observed, clearly fascinated by the concept. A simplification, but essentially correct, Minister Navalori acknowledged. Though the experience of accessing a memory pool is more immediate than retrieving data, one does not merely know the information. One experiences the emotional and sensory components as well. That's why water sharing is so significant in your culture, Xander realized. You're literally sharing memories. Precisely, Lyra confirmed, her skin patterns shifting to indicate approval. The ritual we performed after your intervention was necessary because unintentional memory transfer had already begun. The emergency water sharing created a preliminary connection that needed to be either formalized or respectfully dissolved. Elena Mitchell, who had remained somewhat reserved until now, leaned forward with interest. So, when Xander gave you water during your emergency, he was inadvertently sharing his biochemical memories? To a limited extent, yes, Lyra replied. Human biochemistry is less structured for memory encoding than Aquarian, but certain emotional imprints and baseline personality markers can transfer nonetheless. It is partly why I felt such immediate trust toward Xander despite our limited prior interaction. This explanation cast their growing friendship in a new light for Xander. So part of our connection is biochemical? He asked, unsure how to feel about this revelation. Lyra's translator emitted a sound that approximated gentle laughter. All connections are biochemical at some level, Xander Mitchell. Your human friendships also depend on pheromones, hormonal responses, and neurochemical compatibilities. The difference is merely one of awareness and control. Before the conversation could continue, a diplomatic aide approached Minister Navalori and communicated something in rapid Aquarian that the translators didn't catch. The minister's skin darkened noticeably. I apologize for the interruption, he said formally. A diplomatic situation requires my attention. Ambassador Navalori will continue the cultural exchange. Please excuse me. As her father departed, Lyra's formal demeanor relaxed slightly. The cultural introduction was the official purpose of your invitation, she said, moving toward a more comfortable seating arrangement designed for mixed-species conversation. However, I requested your presence today for additional reasons. Dr. Mitchell nodded in understanding. The research proposal. Yes, Lyra confirmed. Our medical team has reviewed the preliminary results and developed a more comprehensive research protocol. However, recent political developments have increased the urgency of our timeline. Counselor Tanner, Elena Mitchell guessed, her political instincts sharp as ever. Lyra's skin patterns contracted briefly in what Xander now recognized as concern. The counselor has proposed new legislation before the Terran Security Council, a bill that would significantly restrict non-essential alien presence on Earth, particularly for water-dependent species. The justification centers on resource allocation during Earth's ongoing climate adaptation. Dr. Mitchell frowned. That's directly counter to the integration protocol's fundamental principles. Indeed, Lyra agreed. However, the legislation includes exemptions for self-sufficient alien presences that can demonstrate minimal resource impact. Our discovery, Xander's enzyme complex, could potentially qualify Aquarians for this exemption by dramatically reducing our water dependency. The political implications suddenly became clear to Xander. So you need to prove that humans can help Aquarians adapt to Earth conditions before this bill passes. Precisely, Lyra confirmed. The preliminary research results are promising but insufficient for policy influence. We require more comprehensive data from multiple human subjects, with Xander as the primary donor due to his unusually high enzyme concentration. Dr. Mitchell leaned forward, his scientific interest fully engaged. My facility has more advanced xenobiological analysis capabilities than what's available at the consulate. If this research is as time-sensitive as you suggest, a formal collaboration would be more efficient. That possibility has been discussed at diplomatic levels, Lyra acknowledged. However, certain security concerns complicate official collaboration. Because Counselor Tanner oversees funding for Dad's facility, Xander realized aloud. Again, correct, Lyra replied, her large eyes shifting between the three humans. The political situation creates a dilemma. Official collaboration risks interference from those opposed to enhanced Aquarian adaptation. Unofficial research lacks the institutional validation necessary for policy impact. Elena Mitchell, who had remained thoughtfully silent during much of this exchange, suddenly spoke up. There's a third option. The integration protocol includes provisions for educational research initiatives, which fall under academic rather than governmental oversight. If the research were structured as a student-led project with faculty supervision, a xenobiological education initiative, Dr. Mitchell picked up the thread, his expression brightening. With Interspecies Academy as the institutional sponsor rather than either the consulate or my facility. Brilliant, Elena. Lyra's skin rippled with what appeared to be excitement. Such an arrangement would bypass Security Council oversight while maintaining scientific legitimacy. Ambassador Xander Mitchell would be credited as the primary researcher, with appropriate faculty advisors from both human and Aquarian educational institutions. Ambassador Xander Mitchell? Xander repeated, confused by the title. A necessary diplomatic formality, Lyra explained. For you to lead an interspecies research initiative with diplomatic implications, you would need equivalent standing to the participating Aquarian representatives. A temporary ambassadorial appointment would satisfy protocol requirements. The conversation continued late into the afternoon, working through the details of how this unconventional research project would be structured. By the time they prepared to leave the consulate, Xander found himself simultaneously excited by the scientific possibilities and overwhelmed by the political complexities. As his parents thanked Minister Navalori, who had returned toward the end of their discussion, Lyra drew Xander aside for a more personal conversation. I must express gratitude beyond diplomatic formality, she said, her translator set to its lowest volume for privacy. Your continued willingness to assist despite political complications demonstrates exceptional character by any species standards. I'm just doing what seems right, Xander replied honestly. Besides, the science is actually pretty fascinating. Indeed. Lyra hesitated, her skin patterns shifting in what he now recognized as thoughtfulness. There is an additional matter I wish to discuss, of a more personal nature. The biochemical exchange between us appears to have created a persistent connection that transcends the ritual of dissolution. What kind of connection? Xander asked, suddenly concerned. Nothing alarming, Lyra assured him. But I have experienced occasional awareness of your emotional states, particularly during moments of strong feeling. Our medical team believes this is an unprecedented side effect of cross-species memory transfer during physiological stress. Xander tried to process this information. You can feel what I'm feeling? Not consistently or with precision, Lyra clarified. More like echoes of significant emotional states. Yesterday, for instance, I experienced a surge of accomplishment and satisfaction that corresponded to your advanced mathematics examination. I don't know whether to find that cool or slightly creepy, Xander admitted. Lyra's skin patterns rippled in what he now recognized as Aquarian amusement. An understandable reaction. I assure you, the phenomenon appears to be fading gradually as our physiologies return to baseline. I mention it primarily because you deserve to know, and because it may have research implications. Before Xander could respond further, his parents rejoined them, ready to depart. As they said their formal goodbyes, he couldn't help wondering what other unexpected consequences might emerge from his simple act of sharing water with an alien in distress. The following Monday at Interspecies Academy brought new complexities. News of the proposed research initiative had spread throughout the administrative hierarchy, resulting in a special meeting called by Principal Wong. Xander found himself summoned to her office during his first period, where she waited along with two unexpected figures, Ambassador Tanner of the Terran Diplomatic Corps and a stern-looking woman introduced as Security Director Reeves from the Terran Security Council. Mr. Mitchell, Principal Wong began formally once he was seated. These officials wished to discuss the research initiative proposed by the Aquarian Consulate. Ambassador Tanner, a distinguished older man with the carefully neutral expression of a career diplomat, spoke first. Mr. Mitchell, your involvement in this proposed project raises several procedural questions. As a minor and a standard academy student, your participation in diplomatic-level research would be highly irregular. With respect, Ambassador, Principal Wong interjected, the integration protocol explicitly encourages student involvement in interspecies collaborative projects. The educational value alone. The educational aspects aren't in question, Security Director Reeves cut in, her voice sharp with authority. The security implications, however, are significant. The enzyme complex identified in young Mr. Mitchell's biology has potential applications beyond simple environmental adaptation. The Security Council has concerns about unregulated biological exchanges with non-terrestrial entities. Xander felt a chill at her clinical description of what had been, to him, an act of basic human decency. I was just trying to help someone in trouble, he said, trying to keep his voice steady. The research part came after. Your motivations aren't under scrutiny, Ambassador Tanner assured him with what seemed like genuine understanding. But intentions and outcomes often diverge in interspecies relations. The Aquarians' interest in human biology has accelerated dramatically since your intervention, because it could help them adapt to Earth more easily, Xander pointed out. That seems like a good thing for everyone. Security Director Reeves's expression hardened slightly. Reduced resource dependence would potentially qualify Aquarians for expanded terrestrial presence under even the proposed restrictive legislation. Some council members view this as circumvention of intended policy outcomes. The political implications suddenly became crystal clear to Xander. You mean Counselor Tanner doesn't want Aquarians finding a way around his anti-alien bill? A flicker of something, perhaps approval, crossed Principal Wong's face before she smoothed her expression back to professional neutrality. That's a significant oversimplification of complex policy considerations, Ambassador Tanner replied diplomatically, though his tone suggested he might not entirely disagree with Xander's assessment. Nevertheless, Security Director Reeves continued, the Security Council has authority to review any research involving potential diplomatic or security implications. Until such review is complete, we must ask that you refrain from participating in any biological exchange with non-terrestrial entities. You can't stop me from being friends with Lyra, Xander said, a flash of anger rising unexpectedly. No one is suggesting interpersonal restrictions, Ambassador Tanner assured him quickly. Merely a pause on formal research participation until proper protocols are established. Principal Wong, who had been observing the exchange with careful attention, finally spoke again. I believe we can find a reasonable compromise. The Academy has established procedures for student research initiatives, including appropriate supervision and ethical reviews. If Ambassador Navalori wishes to participate as a fellow student researcher rather than a diplomatic representative, the project could proceed under standard Academy protocols. That would address the diplomatic concerns, Ambassador Tanner acknowledged. However, the security review would still be necessary for any findings before publication or implementation. The Academy accepts those conditions, Principal Wong agreed, though Xander thought he detected a note of resignation in her voice. Mr. Mitchell, please inform Ambassador Navalori of these parameters. The research may proceed as an educational initiative only, with all diplomatic implications officially separated from Academy activities. With that compromise established, Xander was dismissed to return to his classes. As he walked through the Academy's corridors, he couldn't shake the feeling that forces much larger than himself were now invested in what had begun as a simple moment of compassion. He found Lyra during their shared lunch period, her expression already suggesting she'd been informed of the meeting's outcome. Your Security Council moves with predictable efficiency, she observed as he sat across from her at their now usual table. Minister Navalori received diplomatic notification of the research restrictions simultaneously with your meeting. I'm sorry, Xander said, feeling somehow responsible for the complications. I didn't mean to create an interplanetary incident. Lyra's skin patterns shifted in what he now recognized as Aquarian amusement. You have done nothing requiring apology, Xander Mitchell. These political maneuvers were inevitable once the adaptive potential of human enzymes was discovered. In fact, the Security Council's direct involvement validates the significance of our findings. So we can still do the research? Just as a school project instead of a diplomatic one. Correct. The restrictions merely changed the formal classification and oversight structure. Lyra manipulated her food, a gelatinous substance that shifted colors as she touched it. However, we must accelerate our timeline. Councillor Tanner's legislation is scheduled for preliminary vote in 17 days. The urgency in her voice caught Xander by surprise. What happens if his bill passes before we have results? The Aquarian diplomatic presence on Earth would be significantly reduced, Lyra explained, her skin darkening subtly, including the likely closure of this Academy's Aquarian program and our consulate's cultural division. My father and I would be recalled to Aquarius Prime for reassignment. The possibility that Lyra might be forced to leave Earth hit Xander with unexpected force. In the short time since their dramatic first interaction, he had come to value their friendship deeply. Then we'll just have to work faster, he said with determination. When do we start? Today, Lyra replied simply. Professor Jameson has approved our use of the Advanced Xenobiology Lab during free periods. Your father has provided research protocols that comply with Academy guidelines while maintaining scientific validity. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an unexpected figure at their table, Vince Tanner, looking uncomfortable but determined. Mitchell, Ambassador, he acknowledged stiffly. A word. Xander tensed, preparing for confrontation, but Vince's demeanor lacked its usual hostility. I wanted to say, he began, then paused, seemingly struggling with his words. What my father is doing isn't right. The protest, the legislation, all of it. The admission clearly cost him considerable effort. Lyra's translator remained silent as she observed him with her large, unblinking eyes. Why are you telling us this? Xander asked, suspicious of Vince's sudden change of heart. Because my father expects me to follow in his footsteps. Security Council, Earth First policies, the whole package. Vince's expression hardened with what looked like genuine anger. But seeing how far he's willing to go, organizing protests against students, using his position to target specific species, it's not what I want to be part of. Why tell us? Lyra asked, her translator conveying genuine curiosity. Because I want to help, Vince said, lowering his voice. My father's sharing his strategy with me, thinking I'm on board. Your research might work, but he's already preparing contingencies to discredit it. I can tell you what's coming. The unexpected alliance accelerated their progress dramatically. With Vince's insider information, they navigated political obstacles while the research team, expanded to include students from all 7 species, worked tirelessly to document the enzyme's effects. On the day of the Security Council vote, Xander and Lyra presented their findings. The evidence was irrefutable. Human enzymatic compounds reduced Aquarian water requirements by 78%, while improving terrestrial adaptation across all measured parameters. Counselor Tanner rose to object, but found himself facing not just scientific data, but his own son standing alongside the research team. The integration protocol was always about finding ways different species can strengthen each other, Xander concluded. This discovery proves what should have been obvious. We're better together than apart. The legislation was defeated overwhelmingly. In the months that followed, the Mitchell-Navalori adaptation protocol became standard treatment for Aquarians throughout Earth and other terrestrial worlds. 3 years later, at their academy graduation, Xander and Lyra stood together as valedictorians, the first human Aquarian pair to share the honor. Remember when Bullies made you beg for water? Xander asked quietly as they prepared to address their classmates. And you poured yours into my mouth without hesitation, Lyra replied, her skin patterns glowing with affection. One simple act of compassion that changed everything. Xander smiled. Not everything. I think I would have found my way to you regardless. A statistically improbable assertion, Lyra observed with typical Aquarian precision, but one I find myself agreeing with nonetheless. Together, they stepped forward to address a graduating class that represented the true promise of integration. 7 species united not despite their differences, but strengthened because of them. And that was the end of the story. If you listened all the way to here, don't forget to leave feedback about what you thought of the story in the comments, whether positive or negative. Your feedback helps us improve. Also, leave your like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. And I'll leave here on the screen another video that I'm sure you'll like. Big hug, and see you in the next story.